The early years were hard years. We were selling hardware.
We've shown you just a few examples of the applications waiting to be explored with the Pixar image computer.
And then we sold software. In the background, we had a group that kept on making animated shorts.
It was something Ed Catmull really loved, but still it was not our business.
I went to John and said, can we do an animated short that's a Pixar short?
Let's do something that really says who we are. Eben Osby and Bill Reeves were teaching me how to use the modeling system. And there was a Luxo lamp sitting there on my drawing table.
The model itself was the world's simplest hierarchy. It was a base, and then an arm, and then another arm, and then a head.
And I started animating it as though it was alive and thinking about, okay, if a Luxo lamp was alive, how would it move around?
You could see him connect with that and saying, oh, I see how this thing works.
And I know one thing I was working on was the shadowing algorithm.
Self-shadowing was the lamp turning around and casting shadows on itself.
What would be a cooler way to show off this technology than having the moving light sources be these lamps moving around so the shadows changed position all the time?
Then the fateful day that Tom Porter came into the graphics room with Spencer, his son. His proportions were totally different than that of an adult. The head was so big, and lift up the arm, and I could barely reach the top of his head, and I started thinking, what would a baby lamp look like? And in the computer, I was able to scale different parts of the lamp differently. We didn't have the computer power to do camera moves. We didn't have the computer power to do background. So I was like, how about a wood grain on the floor? We have that, right? Yeah, okay. I can work with this.
John had a very clear idea of what the limitations of the medium were, and so he told a story that he could tell in that medium and not have to invent stuff that was impossible to invent at the time.
And we premiered it at SIGGRAPH.
As soon as the lamp moved, people started going crazy. And then the ball came in, and they were going nuts. And I remember actually shrinking down in my chair, getting a little frightened, thinking, what's going to happen when the funny part gets here?
It's only a minute and a half long. Before it was done, people were giving it a standing ovation.
Poor Gary Rydstrom, his wonderful sound work was never heard at that screening because the crowd was just literally screaming their heads off.
And people were just talking about it forever as the first time they'd seen it. And the it that they had seen was the first time they'd seen emotion and character and storytelling in a computer-animated film.
There's curiosity, there's dismay, there's sympathy, there's bemusement, a whole range of things that he was able to get through to the audience using just a few joint angles in this thing.
You realize that, okay, it's no longer a test if it's actually touching you in some way.
They laugh, they cry, they go out singing the songs. And I'll never forget Jim Blinn, one of the giants in the computer graphics research world, came to me after the show. And he said, John, I have a question for you. And I thought, oh no, Jim Blinn, he's going to ask me about the self-shadowing algorithm. I know he is. I don't know that. He goes, John, was the parent lamp a mother or a father? And I just smiled, and I thought, we did it. We did it. You know, it's about the characters. Those early days at Pixar were really magical for me. I was the only animator. Ed Catmull and everybody said, okay, here's the new research we're doing. Let's figure out a story and make another film for SIGGRAPH.
6 months doing the short, and then 6 months developing software, and then 6 months doing the next short.
Technically, what we were trying to do at the time was to lay the foundation for doing feature films.
And so Red Stream, for instance, we wanted to show off this new rendering system that we had. We had the Pixar image computer, and we wrote a rendering system that ran on it. Look, you can see it rendering right now in here.
This is actual speed. This isn't touch-using video.
Oh, hey, cool.
Back in those days, everybody didn't have their own computer.
The animation station that we used, we had one of in the building, but it was a big deal. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars.
This is a picture system right here. And this is a Pixar, this is Jabba and Robbie's, this is CCI. Me and Eben and Bill and Ed, we'd just kind of be sharing one computer, and I would always take the midnight shift, you know. Got most of my animation done from about 10:30 at night until 4 or 5 in the morning. And then I had a futon under my desk, and I would sleep there.
How come your car has the best parking spot?
Because it hasn't moved in about 3 days. I've been sleeping here.
In the car?
No, in my office.
Oh.
This is kind of interesting. This is how I tested out the animation of the tag. See?
Oh, that's great.
See, so you can see it. I got the movement of the tag.
Would you make movies of this, or would you just watch it?
No, I just would watch it. People walk in, we had visitors walk in once, and I was staring at this thing like this. And they kind of like, John, are you busy?
How long did it take you to animate the sequence we just saw?
That was about 5 days. That was a little long.
5 days? How many hours a day were you working?
Oh, just a couple. Bill Reeves and Eben Osby and I, we wanted to do these night shots in the rain, in a city, these kind of neat, gritty shots, something that no one's ever seen before.
Red Stream was the first film where we were trying to emulate a particular look, moody, dark.
And I very much wanted to do something with kind of a sad ending, having more of a pathos. And I always say, oh, that was Pixar's blue period. Red Stream is very popular in Europe.
Tin Toy was probably the hardest of the shorts.
It was this great little idea that I had gotten from looking at videotape of my nephew playing with his toys. Everything he picked up went into his mouth, and he slobbered on it. I thought, imagine what it must be like to be a toy in the hands of a baby. That baby is like a monster. It was a challenge. It was twice as long as Red Stream. It had twice as many shots. It was using Mimvy, or Marionette, our animation system, for the first time. It was using RenderMan for the first time. And it had our first human character, the baby, in it.
It was a much more organic kind of character. Skin, facial animation, even though when you look at it today, you sort of go, ooh, that's a weird looking baby. I had to write a whole system to do the modeling.
What now seems amazingly primitive at the time was the limit of what we had figured out how to do with the computer. So we were doing things like soft shadows and the textures of wood flooring and cloth on the couch and a magazine on the couch.
So everybody who could model anything had to pitch in to make a toy to go under the couch. I made the little airplane. I built the fire hydrant.
I modeled a robot who's hiding under the couch.
And Ed Catmull said, well, I'll make something for you. How about an elephant? Great, Ed, we'd love an elephant. So he went off and decided, well, to do an elephant, first I need to implement Bezier patches in our modeling language. So he did that. And then he sketched an elephant on a piece of graph paper. And then he sat down with a text editor and manually entered the coordinates for every point on the elephant. And out came a perfect elephant. And that is the most math-geeky thing we had ever seen. It was the first 3D computer animation ever to win an Academy Award. But the most important thing that Tin Toy did was plant in our heads the idea of toys being alive. And out of that grew Toy Story.
By the time we did Knick Knack, we might have had 10 or 12 people.
In 1989, we all agreed, let's back off a little bit. Let's make a film that's fun and not very demanding.
Consolidating our gains and making a film with the techniques we knew how to make.
And John said, this time I want to make a real, Chuck Jonesy sort of cartoon.
It was the first film where we worked on the story as a team.
When they were having discussions about the story of Knick Knack, what it might be, or what would go on with it, we were all part of it.
I remember the story conference where the ending came up, all right, he falls off and he ends up in a fish tank. And it was Deirdre Warren who said, and there'll be a mermaid there, right?
And John said, yes, let's do it, or that's right. And I think that's a great indication of the collaborative spirit.
Knick Knack, it was, again, all hands on deck.
Everybody worked on a little bit of everything. We had people designing their own characters. John didn't do every bit of the animation as he had done on previous films, but he let us do, our personal characters. Mine was the flamingo.
In Knick Knack, I believe I modeled the igloo.
I animated the dance cycle of the pyramid. That was my giant contribution to the animation there.